Welcome to Soundbites by Sounding Board. I'm Christine Tao. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Sounding Board. I'm thrilled to have Dave Ulrich join me today. Dave Ulrich is the Rensis Likert Professor of Business at the Ross School of Business, and he's also the partner and co-founder at RBL Group. I've followed Dave for quite some time. He's a thought leader in the HR space that really puts together some incredible frameworks and methodologies around how to think about developing the talent in your organization and leadership. So Dave, thank you so much for joining me today.
Christine, thank you. What a privilege to spend time with you and your audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, look, Dave, one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about today is a recent post that you penned around uncertainty. As you know, uncertainty is probably the word of 2020, that and maybe resilience. And I'd love to just hear a little bit more about your thoughts there and what led you to write that. And what are some of the key concepts that you think are important for folks to understand?
You know, Christine, it's not hard to look outside or read the paper or turn on a television. And here's what you see. The context in which we live is so dramatic. The global pandemic. I remember most of us when we're old, and you're not old enough to probably remember, but we have emotional events we can remember. For me, it was John Kennedy's death. It's the space shuttle crash. It's 9/11. I bet you knew where you were when you heard about 9/11. Where were
Well,
you?
actually, I was in New York, if you would believe it,
Oh,
and I
wow.
had just graduated college that year. So, like you, that was the moment I think for me that really defined a lot of my just beliefs and thoughts and how I face the world.
Where were you in New York?
I was right in near NYU. So I
Wow. So,
remember
uh,
right where, they'd
uh,
closed downtown and they were closing south of Houston. So we were in that area. It was one of the strangest things, just to take a moment, was that you imagine New York being this incredibly bustling place, and to be there when the streets are shut down and you just look around and there's none of those sights and smells. It was impressionable, to say the least.
you know, and I think we remember those. I think we're going to look back and remember when we finally realized that the global pandemic was real. I mean, there were pieces of it in January, February. There's this SARS disease out of China, and we can almost find a date. And it'd be fun to see when was your day that you knew it was real. I was teaching a class at a local university. I got out of the class at 9 o'clock, got in my car on March 11th, and they said the NBA season is canceled.
That's
And I go, you got to be kidding me. This is real. And what was there a reality moment for you as you look back into that February, March, April timeframe?
Oh, I do, because that very weekend before we went into shutdown, we were trying to squeeze in that last ski weekend here in Tahoe in California.
Oh,
And I remember checking the weather and then seeing the news and realizing, this was something serious.
yeah.
This wasn't something that was just happening over there.
I think you'll tell your two children, this is when I knew I couldn't go to Tahoe or I couldn't squeeze in the trip. For me, my NBA season's over, and then what we thought was, well, this is going to be over by Easter, at the latest summer. Oh, summer's going to destroy it. As it's lingered and had this long tail, I think we're discovering there is no new normal. If somebody comes to you and says, here's the new normal, turn around and run. Uh, Number one, if they knew the new normal, they'd be investing in stocks. They'd have bought Zoom in January and Amazon in January. We don't know the new normal. But what do we know? We know there are some principles that are going to shape our lives going forward. I think you said it beautifully. One of the principles is uncertainty. You just don't know. When will this end? And so that principle of uncertainty only gets heightened because you have the global pandemic. Then we have the incredible racial injustice, which is just so devastating. And it's how do you help manage people who have backgrounds of difference? And you say, boy, that's in the US, but it's global. That's immigration. That's refugees in Brexit. That's refugees in Europe, the injustice to people. Then you have all the fires and the events in California. You've had smoke and earthquakes and locusts. Then you have I'm not sure if you've noticed, there's political posturing right now in the United States. I mean, it's just everybody. It's just disgusting, and you just couple all of these events in the world around us, and what's the word? It's uncertainty. And then the question becomes, What do I do with uncertainty? And there's two. You say, oh, tolerate it. Well, tolerate it isn't very good. You give up. The other is you create false hope. Oh, this is over in April. Well,
Right.
between false hope and giving up hope, I love the word. And my wife and I sat down and said, what's the word that's got to be used? And I love the word harness.
Harness.
You harness uncertainty. You harness the sun. You harness the wind for energy. You harness and wear a parachute when you jump out of a plane. How do you harness uncertainty? And what we discovered, and I'll stop with the theory, is the world is changing in ways we can't predict or anticipate. We have no control over any of those issues. We can control how we respond, and our response is not to create false hope. Here's the new normal. That doesn't help. Or to give up hope. I'll just tolerate it. How do you find realistic hope? How do you find opportunity? And if you can harness uncertainty, that's where that opportunity begins to come.
Well, it's such an important point, and one we talked a lot about sounding board as well at the start of the pandemic. We said, with crisis comes opportunity, right? You always have a choice in how you decide to act or react as your situation or environment changes. But as on an individual basis, there may be ways that folks can do that. How do you think about that from an organizational basis, how they harness uncertainty?
Well, it's a great concept. So what I did and what I love to do, just to give you background on me,
Yeah.
I'll show you. I love taxonomy. Nobody knows what it is. They think it's taxidermy. Ooh, we're in my home office and we can do fun things. I dug out my dissertation from 40 years ago, and it's a numerical taxonomy. So it's about statistics and
Oh my goodness.
how do you find statistical ways to simplify? And I'll just show you one other fun thing, just so that people see this as fun. Back then, you did a dissertation, and there's a group in Michigan called University Microfilms that sold your dissertation. I
Oh
made
my-
$11.85. So for a year's work, I made $11. But I love the concept of simplicity out of complexity. That's taxonomy. So I went to the industries where uncertainty is real. And you've got those in so many industries. You've got those in the military,
Right.
where they talk about VUCA. You've got those in investment banking. You talk about risk. You've got those in neurology. David Ulrich talks about scarfs, scarcity. That's you got it in learning. Carol Dweck talks about growth mindset. All in physics, the Heinrich uncertainty principle. In religion, it's called faith. All of these disciplines have at their core a concept of uncertainty. So what I did is I dove into that stuff. That's what I love to do. And I said, are there some common principles across those different disciplines? I discovered five. Number one, tame your apprehensions.
Okay.
Don't run away from uncertainty, run into it. You try to hide. God, I'm feeling everyone I know right now, and except you and I've not chatted, we're feeling pandemic fatigue. We're feeling malaise. If you've got two kids at home, how do I manage not the life experience of work and life? And instead of trying to hide from them, run into them. What am I facing? What is it? And learn to tame what am I afraid of? What are my emotions? And learn to tame them. You can't get rid of them, but tame them. Number two, focus on the future. Everybody's talking, and you said they're talking about resilience. I get worried resilience looks backward. And it says, what did I do? How did I fail? How did I learn? I'd rather in uncertainty go forward. So backward is gone. What's the future? What does that future look like? Can I anticipate that opportunity? And that's one of those things. I mean, in those disciplines, it comes out with the growth mindset. It isn't a fixed mindset is when you look back and you become resilient. A growth mindset is when you go forward.
That's right.
And anyway, we got five. I'll do the other three quickly, and then we can go deep into any of them. Be realistic in managing change. Think big, fail fast. You're not going to succeed. I'm not going to do webinars well. I had not done webinars until January of this year, but I'm trying, and I'm realistic. I'm assuming as you started Sounding Board, it wasn't perfect. How do you scale coaching?
That's right.
So that's okay. Be realistic. The other one is experiment quickly. Try something. You got an idea? Go try it. I've tried things. I just showed you my dissertation. I tried that. That doesn't always work. Try stuff. The other one is surround yourselves with people who are like-minded. They often talk about what influences teenagers the most, and it's often their peers in terms of their attitudes and their behaviors. Surround yourself. If I'm around somebody who's just cynical and negative, don't spend time. So those are some of the principles that we have found that help me harness some of that uncertainty.
Well, I think that one of the ones I thought was particularly interesting is this idea of looking forward, right? And I think, particularly in coaching, one of the core principles is really it's about how do you manage the upset? You know, everyone has upsets that happen throughout their career, through their day. But then how do you take that and then use that to have a forward motion? What's your next action, right? And
I
how do
love
you
it.
harness that? But I think one of the things people are struggling with is, you know, uncertainty means it's naturally hard to visualize that future when so much is changing. So, how much of that future is visualizing what you want it to be, imagining what you want it to be, or, tell me a little bit more about that.
I love that one because I think the goal of that envisioning the future is anticipate success. So you say, what would you like in the future? I know the past has been hard and I'm empathetic. That's the apprehensions piece. But tell me what you'd like to be known for. What would you like to do more of or less of? One of my favorite questions is, what do you want? What would you like? Almost a clean sheet of paper. What then are the behaviors of that future aspiration? Given that future, what would I do more of or less of? And fold the future into into the present, and then begin to say, so what progress am I making? And so when I had the privilege of doing coaching, obviously not as many people as you, and I don't scale it as well as you. I always love to start by asking someone to write an essay. Write me an essay. What would you like your leadership brand to be? Look at all the drivers of your leadership brand, your mentors, your parents, your ideas that you've found. What would you like to be known for as a leader? Envision that future. And I think when a leader can begin to ponder some of that and say, wow, this is what I'd like to be known for. What are you doing now to make that happen? How do I fold that into the present? And to me, that's harnessing some of the uncertainty. It's not being, well, I'm not limited, because sometimes you want the ask. One of my colleagues taught me, your aspirations should exceed your resources. You
That's
should
right.
aspire to a future more than you have, but not too much. I mean, I'm never going to be a pro basketball player. And guess what? Look at me. One, I'm too old, and two, I don't have the talents. But I can watch pro basketball. I can enjoy pro basketball, except on March 11th when it shut down. But I think that envisioning the future is so powerful. I can tell a quick anecdote. When I coach business leaders periodically, I've had the privilege of coaching some. And by the way, this has got to put this in context. This is a CEO of a very large company, so income is not his issue.
That's right.
What's on your mind? And he talked. What would you like? And he talks. And I went in one day and he said, I said, you feel a little down because we all feel down. And I said, yeah. I said, why? And he said, my 15-year-old son and I aren't getting along very well. And I said, oh my gosh, I don't think that's ever happened. And he said, really? And I said, of course it's happened. Fathers and sons don't get along. Tell me about your son. And he said, I love my son, but I'm working a lot as CEO, and my son's good at school. He's got these gifts. What does your son love? This was in New York. He loves baseball. Who does he follow? The Yankees. And I looked at the CEO and I said, the Yankees are in the World Series tomorrow. And tomorrow night they're playing at Yankee Stadium. And he said, yeah, I guess that's true. And I looked and I said, go. And he said, really? And I looked and I said, your son's right. You are a doofus. Said, I don't have a ticket. And I said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I don't know what you made last year, $3-5 million. Get a ticket, and don't get a ticket in the bleachers right behind home base. I got to be careful here. It might cost you thousands of dollars, but you know what? That's the equivalent for you and for me of a McDonald's hamburger. So, and he said, really? And I said, go. And he did. And he took it. I get emotional here. He took his son and they went to the game. They had a driver. They got there early. They ate bad hot dogs. They had a game. And the day later he called and he said, thank you for reminding me that even in the midst of stress, I can figure out what I want. And many business leaders have the resources to use to make that happen. and I used a resource. I mean, who's going to remember whatever I spent? I don't even know. But my son and I had a night that I will remember for generations. I hope we can help leaders envision that future. This was family, not business, but see what it is that we want, and then use the resources we have to make it happen. I mean, it's not complicated. Go to the Yankees game. By the way, I'm not sure that's where I'd go. I don't know if you'd go there, but but I hope that story captures that uncertainty and concern. Boy, my son and I are struggling, and we don't need to go to 16 sessions of father-son meetings. Go do something that creates a future experience for your son and you. And I thought, boy, do I hope we can help executives do that of all types. The women and the men who have resources and incredible demands. It's tough today to do the work we do.
Well, I
So
think
take
that's
off.
an important point. And I think, during this time, those demands have been, bigger than before. I'm a parent myself, so I'm also juggling running our company, trying to manage distance learning. You think about wanting to be there for your team at the same time that there's a trade-off you have to make with your own personal life. So how do you think about what advice you would give for leaders, especially leaders today that are just so stretched with their time?
I should show a picture. I'll do a quick picture because I get to show family pictures. You don't get this with most of the people you interview, but I think being home could be personal. This is wonderful wife. These are the books she's written and our granddaughters. People have asked my wife and I, and we have 10 grandkids. Ooh, we just did a picture of our 10 grandkids. I have it somewhere. I can't find it right now. They've asked Wendy and I have a PhD. Wendy has a PhD. How do you do it? And here's the magical word we've got. Write it down and see if it's true for you. Muddle. Muddle. What that means, you muddle. We didn't plan it. We didn't say, this is what we're going to do. We muddled and we made mistakes and we went over this boundary too far. I worked too much. We had expectations. I want to be the greatest academic scholar in the history of the world. No, I'm not going to get there with 2 kids. My wife, I'm going to be the greatest therapist who ever lived. I'm not going to get there. I'm going to get a PhD at Michigan, but I'm not going to make, and you simply muddle. And you say that's the realistic expectations piece of taming uncertainty. Let's be realistic, at least in our lives. And you may be good at this with your husband and you and your 2 kids. We discovered with 2 careers, we had 3 children. We could not both have A careers at the same time unless we outsourced our kids. And we decided we don't want to outsource our kids. So this is a story I don't share very often. So for the first 7 years when I was a professor at Michigan, I stayed home 2 days a week while Wendy did her PhD. She doesn't have the greatest PhD. I did not get tenure because in that 7-year period, I didn't publish. I was taking my kids to school, doing the day runs with the other women in the neighborhood. And you know what? It's fine. What do you want? It's fine. My career's been okay. But I think you muddle. And I hope we get that. Anticipate a future. What do I see? Realistic expectations. People say, well, we're going to have 2 kids. We're going to raise our kids. We're never going to use a nanny. We're both going to have A+ careers. We're going to homeschool our kids. If you can do it, more power to you. What are you going to muddle through? And we muddled a lot.
I love that. I thought you were going to say the word no, but I love the word muddle even better because it gives you this feeling of you just keep going. And sometimes you're plotting, sometimes you don't quite know which direction you're going, but you're still moving forward.
And then be creative. For example, fall was always stressful. Wendy was doing her PhD. I was teaching regular courses. And so my gift for my wife for Christmas, and the value of the gift is what she got. On Christmas Day, I took our 3 kids away for a week because I hadn't seen them much
You
during
are
the
a
fall.
saint. That's
I
that's
wasn't. By the
every
way, this
working mother's desire.
well, and it was good for me because I was busy in the fall. I didn't see kids, so we'd get on an airplane. We'd go to San Diego. We'd go to Texas. We'd go on it. We went to a dude ranch once, and my 3 kids and I spent 5-6 days together. And Wendy had a week where she was able to kind of get settled down again. And by the way, that's called muddle. And how did you plan that? I don't know, but we were responsive. And then we weren't great at everything. I mean, I didn't get tenure. Now, some people would say you weren't smart enough. That's probably true too. But you satisfice, FICE, and you make the best you can. And I love that. That's part of uncertainty as well. Is where do I want to go? I want to have relationship. Now our kids are older and we have really good relationships with our kids. And I think some of that is we invested when they were younger. And we did use babysitters at times. I'm not naive about that. And we made so many mistakes. I'm not going to fault that. But on the other hand, our kids knew that they were always priority. And you keep that up. I'll give one other quick story. So you say to your kids, as your teenagers, it sounds like you have teenagers, as they get older.
Oh, mine are small, actually. So I've got a second grader and a preschooler.
By the way, what I did, and again, this is muddling. I don't know if nobody's traveling, but if you were traveling with Sounding Board, I made a deal with each of my kids that I'd take them on a business trip once a year.
Oh,
so I called my mom, who was retired, and I said, Mom, do you want to go to Hong Kong for a week?
Amazing.
Yeah, I'd love to go to Hong Kong. Well, there's a small caveat. I'm gonna take, then I took all 3 kids. I'm going to take the 3 kids to Hong Kong, and if you watch them, I'm going to tell the client I got to be done at 5. So I'm going to work, and then we're going to have an evening together. I took each kid once. I took one of our kids to Whidbey Island up in Seattle. We're part of a church group. I called the leader of our church group and I said, is there someone who could watch my son or my daughter for 7 or 8 hours while I work? And you can find, again, people you trust. And she and I had a great 3 days. I mean, it's that kind of stuff. Back to the example of the baseball game, use the resources you've got.
That's right. And I think be open to integrating your work in your life. Right. We just finished a webinar at Sounding Board with Dr. Sohee Jun. She's the author of Mommy Tracked. And she was talking about this concept of work-life integration. And I think COVID has really shown folks what that can look like, given that I get a view into your office and your world.
I love it.
You and mine. It's really brought that personal life to the forefront in your professional life in a way that just wasn't there before.
Yeah, and I think what we sometimes have is leadership hypocrisy, where leaders can put on a show and it doesn't. Well, that's what you try to coach against. Right. Is you try to say you don't need to put on a show, you don't need a facade. Let people see you're good and you're bad. And when I have the privilege of coaching with leaders, sometimes they're afraid to let people see their pain. This is hard. I don't know what to do. That's okay. Anyway, and so that's the uncertainty. It's taming apprehensions, figuring out envisioning a future, setting realistic expectations. And then experimenting, try stuff. Sometimes it didn't work. And then surrounding yourself with cohorts who appreciate who you are and what you do.
Well, Dave, I'd love to switch gears a little bit because a lot of your work also centers not just on the leaders, but on the HR leaders themselves, given that they are one of the sort of core stakeholders in being able to create, implement, and deploy a lot of these strategies. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, you've got some incredible frameworks, but for so many of the HR leaders we've talked to over the last few months, it's felt like they've been on the front lines of battle, whether it's dealing with restructuring or layoffs, or now having to fashion, public commentary on social activism and what's happening. But it's felt, I think, never ending and overwhelming. At the same time that they also recognize that they have to be a partner to their executives, and businesses really have to go back to the basics and move the business forward in order for the organization to move forward. And so I'd love to hear, any frameworks, or what have you seen folks that you've worked with, and what have you advised them to think about in their role as HR leaders during this time?
Let me try to do that with a very simple exercise. I do talks with HR folks periodically, and almost always I like to start with this question. What's the most important thing that HR or a business leader can give an employee? Very simple question. I give you 4 choices: a sense of belief, meaning and purpose, a sense of becoming better, growth mindset, learning, a sense of belonging, a community, a safe place, psychological safety, all the above. or none of the above. 80% say all the above, and it's wrong. Let me say that again. What's the most important thing that HR can give, or a business leader, an employee? Believe, become, belong, all the above. Wrong. The most important thing we in HR can give an employee as a business leader or an HR professional is an organization that succeeds in the marketplace. Let me say it again. Unless and until we succeed in the marketplace, there is no workplace. Now, I get HR people really angry, but it's all about people. People are our most important asset. And I say, may I change that? People are our customers' most important asset. If we're not hiring people, training people, paying people, communicating with people, developing people in ways that create value for our customers, there's not going to be a workplace. So that doesn't mean you don't treat people well. I firmly believe that. I mean, by the way, if you don't believe in treating people well, you should go away. In fact, anyway.
Or not work in HR.
Or not working. Well, somebody said, what's the most powerful HR decision that helps a company win? Here it is. Place your lowest performing employee in your competitor and tell them to stay. So if you don't treat people well, go work there. But of course I want people. And then the thing you put behind it is 2 words, so that. Well, I want to treat my people with dignity, with respect, so that what? So that my organization succeeds with my customers, with my investors, in my community. Because unless that so that is answered, I've created a great place. I'll give one example. You're high tech. A couple of weeks ago, somebody sat down with me and they showed me a new app, and it was their phone. It was an engagement app. We can do social media. We can scan. What's the website? Glassdoor.com. We can get social media. We can get an app that will show the engagement level in your company. And we can tailor that and we can do all this stuff. And he went 20 minutes without stopping. Oh, this is the coolest app. It's so good. It's so powerful. Dave, would you help invest in or sponsor our company? I said, why? Because our app is so good. And I said, why? Because the app is so good. It's online. It's really cool. Why should I care? And he said, what do you mean? I said, if I'm a business leader, to be honest, I don't care about the app as much as I care about my employee productivity, my employee well-being. I care about my customers, my investors, the community. You've started your entire discussion with what you know, not with what I, a business leader, care the most about. So when I talk to HR people, my first comment is, if you had 20 minutes with a business leader, talk about, pick it, talent, compensation, careers, training, where would you start? Oh, here's what I could do in my app. No, here's where you start. Business leader, ma'am, what are you worried about? What's on your schedule? What's on your scorecard? Is it market valuation? Is it cycle time with customers? Is it customer retention? Is it product innovation? What is it you're worried about that just is something you need to resolve so that you can get there? Good. Would you like to have a way to make that happen? I can help you find talent, leadership skills, organizational capabilities, and the HR services that will help you accomplish what you want. Would you like to talk more? That's it. By the way, you're a leader. You're creating this incredible company with Lori, Sounding Board. If I were your HR advisor or your coach, I'd start by saying, don't answer. You don't need to do that. This is a public forum. What is it you're worried about as the founder, co-founder of Sounding Board? Is it product cycle time? Is it the technology? Is it the cost of product? Is it the customer service? Is it our retention rate? I don't know what it is. And frankly, I don't care, except I care for you. But once you know what it is, then I'd say, boy, Christine, can we get the right people to make that happen? Can you as a leader put your time and energy on the things that will make that happen? Can you build the right culture to do it? And can we design then the HR practice areas, staffing, training, compensation, careers that will sustain it? My job in HR is to help you do your job. Boy, that's a long answer.
No, but I think it's really important because it's actually not something that is commonplace when you think about how a lot of companies or sometimes even HR leaders think about what their role is. One, it's really, we are here in the Bay Area, we're all about tech, and tech is all about put the customer first. And I think one of those philosophies is rooted in, well, what does your customer need? That's what your company needs. And then, of course, you will need to be able to equip your people to be able to do that.
Yep. Yep.
But Dave, I think, just to push you a little bit more is that these things always sound great in theory, but when the rubber hits the road and you've got to make hard choices, or, you often hear about opposing priorities, it feels like that there's a juxtaposition of being able to care for your employees and be able to care about the business and moving the
I
company
love it.
forward.
Can
What
I
do you
turn
do
your
then?
word juxtaposition into a word called paradox? One of the things we find in research is that the most successful business leaders and HR leaders navigate paradox. People say manage paradox. Manage is the wrong metaphor. It's like harness uncertainty. You don't tolerate it. You harness it. You navigate. And what that manage paradox means, you pick a side and you go for it. Make money in spite of people. Navigate means you manage or you navigate the tensions between. For example, I'm coaching a business leader a few months ago. The times are tough, and she's going to have to let someone go.
Yeah.
Dave, what's your comment? And here was my comment to her. Your job as a business leader is to make sure that you let that person go, because you have to do that. That's the business requirement. You can't walk away, in a way that makes that person feel better about themselves. And here's one of my ultimate tests. When an employee leaves an interaction with you as a business leader, do they feel better or worse about themselves? Now, you're never going to hit 100%. I'm not naive about that. That's stupid. That's realistic expectations. And she said, how do I do that? And I said, don't know. Figure it out. No, I mean, because it is so hard. I mean, you've been there.
Yes.
And we talked. By the way, this is a bit of an emotional one. And I knew the employee who was being let go. I knew it was happening. So I said a little silent prayer, kind of if there was any form of intervention. The employee called me an hour after the meeting. And he said, Dave, I'm going to change my job and I feel great. And I said, what happened? And he said, I went into the meeting and she put away all the other stuff. So she was focused on me. And she looked at me and she said, I care about you. I care deeply about you. You matter to me, and your family matters to me. And the role that you're in right now is not taking advantage of the talents and gifts you've got. And me as a leader have not done you a good job, because your gifts are not being used and I've not served you well. And so I need to help you find a place, either in our company or elsewhere, where your gifts will help you be successful. How are you feeling about your gifts? And he said, I'm not being used well. He said, I agree. Let's find a place. This tender moment. Now, he ended up moving inside the company, but he could move outside. And she said, if you go outside, I'm going to do everything. You have many gifts. This particular setting is not the place that they're being magnified. Let's find a place. And I will do everything in my power to make that happen. He feels good. He has a conversation with his family, feels good. She feels, as the leader, that was not easy, because the thinking was not about what I have to do to let him go. The thinking is, how can I help him? When he walks away, I want him to have a better experience. And again, it doesn't always work. I'm coaching a man yesterday who sent an email to an employee. You should do this. And he said, what did I do wrong? I said, in front of you should do this, but in order for you to be more successful in your job, this is something you should try. And those 8 or 9 words just temper it a little bit, that our job as leaders, even in these tough times, is to help people find a place where they're able to fulfill their potential. I'm not naive. That doesn't always work. I'm not naive at all. But I hope we can find a way that works.
I do think the word that keeps coming to mind is to be brave, as a leader, which means oftentimes people think that serving your employees or serving, as an HR leader, serving the organization is to do what they want. And that's actually not the case,
That's right.
right? Your job is not to please everyone. Your job is to help the organization not only survive, but thrive, but to do that in a way where ideally there's congruence between what the employees themselves also can bring to the table.
That's why I love that outside in logic. When you say your job as a leader is to help your company succeed in the marketplace.
That's right.
And if the marketplace is demanding cost efficiencies, look at some of the industries right now in lodging, in restaurants, in air transportation,
That's
it's
right.
demanding efficiencies. That's the market reality. So how can we help manage that? And it's that emotional sense of connection. And if we're built on that, I think it helps. When we can make that emotional connection, we can have good discussion. I'll give a quick example. How do you institutionalize that? We were working for a company in the Mideast, one of the largest companies in the Mideast. They had been through 4 or 5 different people who tried to do performance appraisal systems. None of it worked. They had tried management by objectives. They had tried behavioral anchored rating scales. One of them was key result area programs, which stands for KRAP. Crap didn't work. And they called us and said, Dave, we need a new performance management system. And they said, we've tried all these. I said, you've got it all wrong. Performance management is not the system, it's the conversation. And when a leader, like that woman I just talked about, can have a conversation with an employee that is meaningful and personal, I don't care what your system is. But if you can't have that conversation, your system will never work. System won't replace relationships. Well, how do we do it? We came up with, and again, I have a dissertation on simplicity. Ooh, I got to show the other cool thing.
How
I
many of these
published books.
dissertations do you have, Dave?
I have one dissertation, but I published another book on HR competencies, and I just got to check. This was published about 5 years ago, so it's old, and it was for $4.23. So
Okay.
I've gone down. I went from $11 to $4. So, by the way, I think that's funny. How many people confess I just got $4 for a book I wrote? But we tried to simplify it. Here's what we said. You're having a conversation with an employee that's going to be difficult. Number one, say, help me understand. Christine comes in, Dave, help me understand. Your projects are coming up late. They're over budget. The customer scores aren't very good. I need your help. Help me understand, put you in a coaching mentality rather than a controlling one. Number two, the data. Help me understand. Your projects are coming in late. They're over cost. They're over budget. They're not sold. Number three, help me understand the data. It's 3, so that we can fix the problem. That's it. By the way, that's so simple. And this company said, well, what system should we use? Behavioral anchored rating scales, MBO, 9 box. I said, I don't care, but get your executives to sit down, help me understand the data to fix the problem. And when they can have that positive conversation, things are going to work better. Anyway, that's the kind of stuff that I hope. Well, I'm assuming that's what you're coaching your leaders at all levels to be able to do. It's not just turn to a system to solve it, build the relationship.
Well, I mean, I think that's just not only is that the core of coaching itself, right? It's being able to have a open and vulnerable relationship so you can start to do the hard work of development and growth.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that a lot of companies miss is they spend so much time on systems, they spend so much time on policies and processes. And what they don't realize is that those don't create the employee experience.
Yeah.
The employee experience gets created by relationships. We know the manager and employee relationship is probably the most important, sort of make it or break it relationship. And yet it's often the place where we don't spend the time and do the investment. And Dave, you've seen this across tons of companies. Why is that?
I think some of it is we've allowed systems to work. Here's an example: organization structure. I love organizations. My first book was Organizational Capability. My 30th book was Market Oriented Ecosystem. A lot of people have a thing called RACI. You may have heard of it: responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. And you got a decision. Let's see who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, and let's go through this decision grid. I don't know your relationship with your spouse. My wife and I have been together 45 years. Not once have we done a RACI. It's Sunday night. We got laundry, we got shopping, we got cooking, we got taxes, we got bills, we got pickup kids. Ooh, let's do a RACI. No. What do? We muddle. Who's got some free? Wendy has a test. Who's going to do that? I think sometimes we use RACI and tools as an excuse for looking at each other. My wife's pretty busy right now in some assignments she's got. She's saying, geez, I'm really busy. And I'm going, Let me do some laundry and shopping this week. Next week you'll do it. I'm assuming you and your husband muddle. Well, let me ask, have you and your husband done a RASI lately? Response.
I don't think I ever done a RASI with anyone, and least of all my spouse.
No, I mean, it's so stupid. But we think in a company, oh, here's a little tool. It's going to make it work. No, let's look at each other. And you look at somebody and say, wow, I'm really stressed. I've got some stuff going on at home. I've got some stuff going on here. We'll fill. And by the way, there's serial equity. That's a very fancy word. Over time, you're going to get reciprocity. If you don't get reciprocity, then it breaks. But I think somewhere in companies, we need to remember, and by the way, I like systems because I think systems institutionalize ideas.
Agreed.
But over time, it's the relationship that builds that success. And I'm so grateful that we can help leaders build relationships. The line we used in my wife and I did a book called The Why of Work, which was a powerful book on meaning at work. And one of the things we said is leaders need to become meaning makers. Your job is to create meaning for others, help people discover their meaning. And the line I like, use your power to empower others. Build on your strengths to strengthen others. Build on your strengths is absolutely terrible. It's narcissism. I'm going to build on my strengths and be better. That's not good leadership. Build on your strengths to strengthen others. That's good leadership. Some leaders say, I'm a good leader. I'm a billionaire. And my comment would be, that's not leadership. Leadership is how many millionaires did you create? And the job of a leader is to empower the next generation. And I find that mindset with leaders just so helpful that, and sometimes I'm babbling here, but sometimes I see leaders who may not, by the way, your next generation are your children and your young children, and you empower. I think some things that we empower the next generation are also the ideas or products or services. You've been part of a company that was successful. I worked with a leader who's created some products and services. I've worked with an architect who's designed buildings. Every time you see your building, that's your next generation. It's not just your children or your progeny. It's the building you drew. It's the software you created.
It's the ideas that you share, right?
And what?
It's the ideas that you share.
It's the ideas you share that become someone else's ideas.
That's right.
I remember once I was an editor on Blind Review on a journal board, and somebody sent me an article, and somebody had done research using my ideas and not given any credit. And so I wrote back to the editor. I said, I don't know what to say. I think it's a brilliant set of ideas. And at first I was really offended, and I think I've matured. Today, when I hear somebody using my ideas, I go, that's my next generation. That's like my son or my daughter or my grandchildren using the things I've taught them without them even knowing that I taught them. And I should take delight. I mean, you have created in your career some wonderful software, services, people. It's delightful that there's plagiarism because they've used them. Now, that takes an ego that I don't always have well. I sometimes get a little annoyed, but that's the leadership job, is to use your strengths to strengthen others, to use your power to empower others. And I love it when that happens. That's building future generations of ideas and products and services, as well as our children, obviously.
Well, Dave, I have really enjoyed the time that we've spent to get together today. I can't believe our time is already up. But do you have, I think we touched on a lot of really important and relevant topics for folks today, particularly around uncertainty and around leadership. Do you have any parting thoughts for the audience?
I will. I love to ask people, what's the best year of your life? Oh, it's the year I was at school. It's the year I was married. The year I had a child. Somebody has said it's the year I was not married. I think they're all wrong. Here's my answer. The best year of your life is the next 12 months. It's the journey ahead, not the journey behind. I mean, I love the idea of resilience. I'm not opposed to resilience, but I'd rather anticipate and create a future. So I look at myself and I say, wow, this pandemic's been hard and the uncertainty is real. I want the next 12 months to be the best 12 months. I don't know what that's going to be right now. Probably no travel, but that's okay. And that's that kind of discovering opportunities in the midst of difficulty. What's the best year of your life? The next 12 months. Why? Because you control it. That's my final thought.
Amazing. Well, for everyone listening out there, let's take that and run with it. Let's make the next 12 months the best year of our lives. And thank you again, Dave, for your time.